Well, hi everyone. It's the 11th, I think, of September. I kind of I kind of live outside time these days. It's one of the advantages of being retired. I wake up and think, "What day is it?" And then I think, "I don't care." But I know today is Saturday because I'm here with all of you in the Rare Book Cafe. And welcome, one and all. I'm Lynn Thompson. I'm the associate producer of the show, also known as the Sorcerer's Apprentice. And that means Alan Smith is gone. He's off doing something fun with his wife and some friends from long ago that they are reconnecting with. And we wish him well. And we're delighted that he has learned to take weeks off because as things go, this show is not that hard to put on, which is why I end up doing it. With me is Thorne Donnelly and Edie Eisenstein, the queen of rare books. We will have Steve on in a few moments, but I should warn you and alert you that it is 195 days until the next Florida Antiquarian Book Fair. Our sponsors, our leaders, the producers of the third largest book show in America. In April of next year, it will be in the fabulous Art Deco Coliseum in St. Petersburg, And if you have not booked a room, you better get on it because it ain't the only thing going on that weekend. And if you don't act soon, you're going to be staying in Miami or God knows where, hundreds of miles away, and having to get up at 3 a.m. to drive to be at the book fair on time. So we warn you of these things because we love you, and what you do with them is your own business. This week coming is a raft of literary birthdays. E. Cummings, the great poet who wrote in lowercase, was born this coming week in 1888. He wrote wonderful poems, and he lived in New York City in the village, in a little alley across from the great lesbian writer Juna Barnes, who wrote Nightwood in 1928. Juna was a fashion plate who became a recluse, and occasionally Cummings would raise his window and shout across the alley, "Juna, are you still alive?" And she would throw something at him. So this is how literary people live. This coming week is also the birthday of my favorite philosopher, Hannah Arendt, who died in the 1970s. She was a remarkable woman, born in Germany, a German Jew who had to flee under the Nazi regime, and literally had to go from country to country as a stateless person, and ended up in America, where she devoted her 35-year career as an academic to the study of evil. She wrote a wonderful book called Eichmann in Jerusalem, in which she covered the trial of Adolf Eichmann, the great Nazi henchman whom the Israeli government kidnapped from Argentina and put on trial in Israel. Her work is provocative. It inspires endless debate. And if you have not read her, I would strongly recommend her to you because we live in a time where evil walks largely across the land. And it is a time when we need to reflect upon how we respond and how we learn from the lessons of the past. It's also the birthday this coming week of a great soldier author, Dwight D. Eisenhower, leader of the American forces in Europe, President of the United States, author of exceptionally readable memoirs about his life and military service. He was born this coming week in 1890. It's the birthday of P.G. Wodehouse, the ultimately silly writer, who was at the same time an absolute genius. Every sentence he writes in 70 odd books that he wrote in his 93 years is filled with brilliant similes. Things like, just around the corner, fate was slipping the lead into the glove. Woodhouse is renowned for having created Jeeves, the brilliant butler who looks after the idiot master, Bertie Wooster. He's been made into movies and television programs, and he was probably the most clueless man who ever lived, because he managed, as the Nazis advanced into France, to get captured. And he was put into a sort of house arrest situation in Germany, where he wrote, if this is Upper Silesia, I can only imagine what Lower Silesia is like. He was invited by the Nazis to do radio broadcasts, which he thought, in his simple-minded way, that it would just be fun. It would be like sending postcards to people back in Britain. But it ended up being the cause of him being labeled a traitor and having to seek exile in the United States. Late in his life, in the 1970s, thanks to the Championship of Evelyn Waugh, he was finally sort of forgiven and given a knighthood by the Queen, and died writing his 74th novel. If you have not read Woodhouse, then you really, really need to. His stories are timelessly funny. And if you have Amazon Prime, there is a series called Blandings you can look at, in which a man much like Woodhouse, an earl whose entire life is centered upon his prize-winning pig, the Empress of Blandings, stumbles from mishap to mishap. It's also the birthday this coming week, the 99th, of Mario Puzo, who wrote The Godfather. And Mario Puzo is one of those people who teach us, who want to be writers, that if you write the right book, you only have to do it once. Harper Lee is another example of the same thing. He wrote The Godfather, and he made more money than God, and then he wisely decided to just keep writing sequels to it and piling up even more fortunes after that. He was basically a one-trick pony who managed to keep exhibiting the same pony decade after decade, and God bless him, he was a great, great storyteller. It's the birthday this coming week of Oscar Wilde, who was probably the funniest and wittiest gay man who ever lived, and who, because of that, was put in prison and subjected to hard labor and exiled to France, and his wife and children changed their name to disown him. He lies in the Père Lachaise Cemetery in Paris under a monument designed and executed by Jacob Epstein, the great sculptor, and it is covered in lipstick kisses by tourists who drop by to pay tribute to the probably most brilliant playwright of his time. It says a lot that despite the scandal that the world imposed upon him because he did not suit their predilections, his plays are in constant production. How many people other than Shakespeare have plays produced 100, 200 years after they were written? Oscar is one of the immortals, and we bless his name this coming week. Arthur Miller, another playwright who falls into that category, has a birthday this coming week. Wendy Wasserstein, another great playwright of New York, who wrote The Sisters Rosenzweig and a number of other successful Broadway plays, lived a sadly short life, but had a wonderful career. also was born this coming week. John le Carre, The Man Who Came In from the Cold, is one of his books. He just published another. He's 86 years old, still at it, an inspiration to us all. And Edna St. Vincent Millay, one of the great poets of the 20th century, was also born in this coming week. So light a candle for those among the ones I have mentioned whom you admire or adore. Remember them all because they enliven our lives, they enrich us, and we celebrate their productivity and their existence. That said, we have waiting here on the 1 yard line the queen of miniature books, tiny little things like this. Edie Eisenstein. Hello, hello. What a lovely blouse. And how are you? And what have you got for us?
Well, number one, I like Ike. I can remember running around as a kid screaming, I like Ike, I like Ike. And E. E. Cummings, as soon as you said that, he wrote, I'll feel, says he. I'll squeal, said she. Why not? So I used to love E. E. Cummings. I used to as a kid. But happy birthday to all of them. May they rest in peace. What I have for today is the Lazofs, who had sent me those wonderful books that I showed last week, the Gerald Ford books. When they sent Stephen some stuff this week, they sent and included another miniature book for me. Now, this is the Constitution of the United States. And also in there, you've got at the end, there's the Declaration of Independence, the Virginia Bill of Rights, the Massachusetts Bill of Rights, the Articles of Confederacy, and so forth and so on, all in this wonderful, wonderful little miniature book. And the first thing that Steve said is that he's going to read it again. So I said, good for you. So from here, it will go to Steve, and he is going to be reading it again this week in the mail. But I thank them. I thank them very, very much for thinking of me and sending it to me. The miniature book societies, again, are out in full. This is the fall 2019 volume number 2 of the Journal of Fellowship of American Bibliographic Societies. And in this book, anything that's going on, they have every organization about what are upcoming activities around the country in the world of books, together with some wonderful articles to read. So that came in the mail this week. And with your membership to these societies, you wind up getting these publications. Another publication that I received this week was the Miniature Book Society from the last conclave. And it is, I told you about the conclave, Small Matters. And in this particular edition, they have pictures and articles of everybody and everything that won a prize. And certainly there were a lot of people that work for the society, not just at the conclave, but all year long. And they are honored in this book, well deserved, with pictures and articles. And that was wonderful. And today, before the show, I called Jim Brogan. Jim Brogan is the president of the Miniature Book Society. And this week online, and with his permission, I am reading the first 2 paragraphs of his letter. I am pleased to tell you that we have signed a contract for our Conclave 2020. Venue, hotel have been completed and a high-level program. It's going to be at the Doubletree by Hilton, located at 455 South Broadway in Tarrytown, New York, which Steve told me is way, way, way upstate New York. The dates for the conclave will be August the 7th, which is a Friday, to Sunday, August the 9th. The typical spread of dates for the group rate will be extended for those dates, and details about reservations and how you can get the discount and the prices will be coming in the future. The program will certainly include the regular silent and live auction. That would be a killer for me, as well as the Sunday book fair. And also, they're working with the FDR Presidential Library in Hyde Park, New York, and they're arranging for a special tour and exhibit of the miniature books that are part of their collection. And then it's a two-page letter with what's going on in the society and the activities. I can't say enough how valuable I find being a member of the Miniature Book Society, the Florida Book Fair Biblio Society, all of the societies for which we pay dues. This is a time of year that everybody's collecting. But as I get these journals and as I get this information and as I get wonderful emails like from Todd Summerfield, I had posted a couple of funny things about getting old and your body falling apart and so forth. Old age certainly ain't for sissies, I'm going to say that. But Todd Summerfield wrote back to me a couple of cute barbs, as did some other people. And you do make such good friends online that also have a passion for miniature books as I do. So again, I thank you for this, and I thank you for watching me. And Jim, I thank you for permission to read your letter. And that's just about all that I have to say. Hello, Steve. I think I'm on because I can't hear it.
I can hear you saying that.
No.
I think we should let Thorn know that his sound has dropped out and Steve is on the phone. So
Hello.
all business as usual here, where we just make it up as we go. So, Thorn, if you can hear me, please drop out and rejoin us. Welcome, Steve, with
Hey,
your,
Lindsay,
with
it's
your
good to be
Frito
here.
Bandito mustache.
Yeah, I finally figured out what I wanted to do with it. Now I gotta get a barber to balance it properly. I got a funny Eisenhower story. I was listening in the wings. And it has to do with not paying attention at a library sale. This was Miami Lakes, probably, well, Edie was there, so it had early years, had to be in the early 90s. A gentleman by the name of Harold Becker, who was a local book dealer here for many years, and myself, we were talking, and another book dealer kind of just walked around us, and out of my peripheral vision that I wasn't paying attention with in reality, he picked up a 2-volume set marked $5, and it was the 2-volume Eisenhower Limited set that at that time was worth about $500. So you brought
Very
back a
good.
memory on that one. Hey, Thorne.
Hello, hello. Well, I just
Well, I went to law school with the son of a lawyer in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. He was a housemate of mine, whose father was President Eisenhower's lawyer after he retired from the
wow.
presidency. And of course, in Gettysburg, that just you might as well just give it up after that point. It's like when Billy Wilder told Orson Welles after Citizen Kane, "Give it up, kid. It's all downhill from here. Once you've been President Eisenhower's lawyer, there's just nowhere to go but down." Except Ralph went back to Gettysburg and took over the family firm, and he is a prosperous and distinguished lawyer to this very day.
Wow.
One of the things I'm going to be doing down the road is I did the documents on these presidential autographs. Now I'm working on the book collection, and whatever Eisenhower signed, he has. But I also found something out just as a segue. In this collection will be, from what I know, the only handwritten presidential speech that was given out that is actually in the president's hand, and that belongs to Gerald Ford. Well, while we're talking
Oh,
about
interesting.
presidents and things, yeah, some appraisal challenges in the future for sure. You were saying before you came back in, Thorne,
I
pick it
had
up
no.
from where you were.
Well, I was just saying it was interesting that Oscar Wilde's the jail that he was in is, I just found out today, is for sale. The British government apparently has closed the penal facility there, and people have an opportunity to either make a monument or a shopping center. I'm just kind of curious to see how well that will go. It's his birthday, so it was obviously mentioned on Literary Hub or something. But at any rate, it's always fun to see Edie, and I always love Sharif, who was in Bucharest, and we were able to contact him, but he did not tell us. I think he's boarded the plane by now, but I think he did not tell us where he's going. So hopefully we'll hear from him next week, and there'll be some adventure that he's been on. But
He's been on quite a few. He's like a traveling roadmap
yeah.
the last few weeks.
But I've had some interesting adventures while you've been out, busy appraising. I've been, buying and selling books is my usual thing, and as I think I mentioned, I've been trying to update my reference collection, and I keep coming across things, and so I thought today I'd talk for a bit about some interesting books I've discovered or missed or changed or whatever. And first thing being a book here that I believe you should be able to pull up for me here. It is called what is this little darling called? It is Flying the Oceans, and this book I actually sold a couple of years ago, and it just came up as I was doing some research today. And I've always missed this book. I was a pilot. Pan Am was my favorite airline way back when, before they managed to have the first terrorist crash over in Ireland there. It was signed by the author to another Pan Am pilot that I may or may not have known. I don't remember. It's been so long since I sold this. But I was thinking, this is one of those books that escaped. It kind of made me think that, oh boy, I really wished I could have saved that one. So I started thinking about, looking around what I had, and I realized that I had a fair number of other books. But I in this business, you must say and tell everybody that that basically, these are not our children, as much as we'd like to say so. It's just not true. That we have to do we have to sell them and all of that. So what I've been doing is trying to come up with alternatives. And one of the things that I've been able to come up with is some of the books we have here, such as Abraham Lincoln. This is a very nice signed copy of the one volume version of the Carl Sandburg's multi-volume versions of Lincoln. If you've never seen it, there's a 2-volume set of the Prairie Years and a 4-volume set of the War Years, which I'll show in a second here. Guess I'll just delete this out for a second. But what they amount to is the larger set is you can have my copies of it for $6,000, which is kind of a little steep for me to be reading. And so what I've started doing is making some replacements. This one right here is was several $100s. It's signed by Carl Sandburg. I should probably add a bit of a backstory. My family's from Chicago, Illinois, and my mother was a writer from there. So Lincoln and Carl Sandburg are probably two of the the gods of the state of Illinois. So combining the two of them, I felt guilty that I never read too much of his work, but now I'm going to replace that and still be able to sell the other one, which is good. But I'm going to try and bring up here, and I'm sure I'll be able to too in a second here, just a picture of the main set that I so wanted to do, which is unfortunately not that one. So let me just keep going back out of here and get to where we need to be. Here we go. And so it's 17, 13. And it's this one right here. And as you can see, it's a fairly large set. And as I said, we have the 6 there. The one I was showing you there is much shorter, but I probably don't have the time to go through the 6-volume set, but I'm certainly going to get through that one. And, hopefully I will be able to go on with that. So, but another one that I was kind of looking at here was I was looking at, I had a copy of Walden. And again, this particular copy was given to me by my sister. Let me see if I can pull this one up here for you. Yeah, no, actually, this is a copy of Walden. Yes, this is this copy that my sister brought up for me, and gave it to me. My sister. It's a 1930 copy. It's printed by R. Donnelly and Sons. So I wasn't terribly thrilled with the concept of actually reading this book and doing my usual sloppiness and probably dropping it or something along that line. So I came up with another copy here that hopefully I can bring up for you. No, sorry about that. It makes it a little difficult to talk and walk at the same time here. But let me keep trying on this. Eventually we'll be able to pull it up. And what I simply did while we're pulling up, I went and I got to the annotated copy here, which I think this might be. Nah, I'm not even going to worry about it any longer. I went out and got an annotated copy of the Lincoln books, and I'm sorry, of Walden, which I did not read in. I was not an English lit major, but now I'll be able to read that. Annotated. It even has a copy in the end of it of Civil Disobedience, which would probably be a good thing for me to read at some point. So I'm going to work with that. But what I was also wanted to share with people, and I'll do it a slightly different way here, is along this, we were talking when I was here last week about some of the bibliographies I found, and I realized that's a pretty boring concept to keep reading, bibliographies and such. But I was going through them, and a couple of mine became, somewhat interesting. So I'm going to share one of these with you. And I'm just going to pull it up for you right now. And since we're going to do this a different way, it's going to work fine. There we go. It is a copy from the 1930s. And it's perhaps one of my more interesting bibliographies in that it's a little hard to look at the picture there, but if you can see here, well, it's fine. That is a dust jacket, and it is a 1930 basically plain paper dust jacket, which are very unusual to have. But this particular volume is also limited to, it includes with it this is a 28 bibliography, and it includes a addenda and corrigenda on 1934, which is tucked into it. It's kind of fun. You don't really see that too often in bibliographies that have been used. And it turns out that this particular one, 500 copies only have been printed. So what you end up having here is a somewhat of a rare book that's part of my bibliographical library, which I just think is kind of fun to have and be able to show us. And but we have other things. Rather than bringing it up, I'm just going to show you what turned out to be a very interesting book for me. I have several copies. I'll pull up one of those for fun here, of Poe's Tales. Now, the one I'm going to try and pull up for you here is quite simply, it is a very pretty expensive copy. It was done by my family printing business a long time ago, and it's probably valued at, it's in a slipcase. I think, again, from the 30s, there was a collection that Donnelly's did of four greats. It was Poe's Tales, it was Melville, Moby Dick. I forget the other two. We'll talk about some other time. But so you have something like this. And again, these are back to things that I just don't really feel all that comfortable reading. So I went out and got another copy of Poe's Tales. Actually, it came in a state I was buying, and I'm flipping the picture up. I will show it to you that it is quite simply a fairly less than interesting volume. It's grayish green, a little gilt, whatever. If I paid more than $5 for that, I will be, frankly, quite embarrassed. But once I opened it up, I was amazed. This is actually a copy of Poe's Tales, and I'll have to take a look here. Random House, New York, 1944. So it's a World War II paper, but by 1944, for those of you that are history buffs, you will remember that we were starting to win that deal. So what we ended up doing was getting better paper is what it really amounted to. And so I opened this book up, and I was just absolutely amazed to find that what was in it is not what I'm going to show you here, but what was in it instead was this marvelous, marvelous picture. And I'm going to show you some more of them that were by a gentleman by the name of Fritz Eichenberg, who was born in a Jewish family in Germany. And so very few, but some of the lucky ones, was able to get out and end up in, and let me just get this up here for you, end up in the United States. He became a Quaker, and he spent a lot of time with Zen Buddhism, which I think is kind of an interesting, interesting combination. But if you look at this, I love woodcuts, woodblock cutting. And I'm flipping through this, as I was saying, this $5 book of mine, and this comes up, and I go, whoa, what is this? This is a fairly strange gorilla with, as you can see there, it's got a little skull and all that. And I just keep flipping through what we have here, in what he had done, and I was absolutely amazed in the beauty of some of his works, which I'm going to keep bringing up here for you on general principles. But we have, it requires a little bit of effort here on my part, so we'll take this one out, and we will place the next one in there. But I pulled a whole bunch to show you guys, and this should be it. And here we go. Look at this lovely picture of our little monkey friend. Be coming up in a second here. It keeps going through a $5 book and discovering a fellow who became quite prolific in his illustrations. He ended up illustrating books in the United States for Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, the Brontes, Poe, which we have here, Swift, many, many more. He was a longtime contributor to a magazine, which I don't think is still around, called The Nation. And so it was just kind of fun to be able to flip through a book that was, I honestly was unknown to me that I even had this thing. And I keep coming up with wonderful, wonderful illustrations. I'll keep feeding you. And so with that, I was just wondering what Steve had been doing for this week. I said I've been just kind of pretty much doing my bibliography stuff and exploring new pictures, looking at old books, looking at inventory, buying some new books, I've been somewhat involved with the purchase of an estate with hopefully I'll be able to talk to you about it next week, and hopefully I'll bring some of the stuff with me to Boston show, which I will be going to as an exhibitor in a couple of weeks. Steve, what's been up with you this week?
Hey, Thorne, I got to ask you, did you ever get hold of that lady? I
No,
sent
I
you
never
the
did.
email. Oh, no, I
No,
was just curious when you said about looking at a library. So I was wondering
something
why you
different.
were showing some of those things. I had, God bless you, I don't know if you heard it or not, Easy just sneezed. While you were going through some of your books, I was kind of just turning around and saying, I just found a few things the other day. And this is one book. I'm going to be talking about the limited editions club is,
Oh,
is
good.
the is what I really had planned to talk about today on the Whitman sampler version. But this book is the book that I would have to say a lot of the better book stories. As a matter of fact, the LEC came out. The history of the LEC, the version of it that I'm going to tell is from this book. And what's even funnier about this book, I realized I left the receipt in it. I bought this book November 3rd, 1990 from Irving Oaklander Books in New York City. So where the hell was I in November of 1990 that I don't remember being in New York? Or
Oh,
Edie,
I was with you.
we must have been on a road trip or something because we met in '87. So anyway, it's a great book on the history of book collecting. Great stories from the time period. This is the hardcover one-volume edition of it. Um, if I remember my bibliography correctly, this is the first edition in 1937. Was it a limited edition in my mind's eye? Um, this volume was designed by Norman Frug. Blah blah blah. 25 copies were printed on Worthing Sterling Wall for private distribution in 1937. Are you telling me I got a privately distributed copy and I'm just finding it out now?
How
I
about
think
these,
so.
Steve?
Huh? You've got it too.
I have two of them. Very
And
rare.
what do you have? When did you see the last price for that?
$25.
Is what you paid for it? No, I mean, what is it? Is that what it
Um,
is today?
this is Normandy House, Chicago,
Yeah, yeah,
37.
yeah.
I've
Okay,
got
so the
one.
other one, what
These
did
are
you?
not the limited. These are 37.
Right, same
Uh,
one I have. Same one I have. The limited, I think, is a 3-volume set. What I was
okay, with
trying
a
to
dust
bring up.
jacket of a $3 price in it.
Mine has a dust jacket and a $3 price in it. Exactly.
Well, you can
Wow,
have
that
both of mine too for 25.
no,
I'll
I
give you
love.
both
Well,
of
I'll
them for
tell you,
25.
it's a great book. But if you can dupe me on this one, I'm totally going to be impressed. This was just fun. Boutels. This is from the 40s. This one is the narrower scope one. This one they add America, England, and Ireland. Um, Again, all this stuff is available online and such, but sometimes it's just easier fingertip. And I always treated those as something like the dramatic reading of a phone book. I did read them from cover to cover and tried to retain what I could. And from time to time, you'll come up with when was the last time you had a book published by, I'm trying to look for some really obscure British author, William C.
What was
Scott.
that one? What was yours? What was that one you just had?
Donna,
Motel?
this one, first editions of today and how to tell them. This
Okay.
one is,
Would you mean
okay,
this? You mean this one right
what,
here? First editions of today and how to tell them?
is that Boutel?
Yes, it is. This is one you
Okay,
said I
what
didn't have.
year? What year?
Okay.
This one's 37.
Now, this is a
And
limited edition, fourth
when
edition, revised, enlarged in 1964.
Uh-huh, okay. And then this one is, I think, the earlier one. There's another thing no, this one's later, University of California, 1949. There's a book dealer's name in here, Herman Kapp. He signed it in February of 50. I got to remember who he was, but I don't remember now. But to bring it up to the point of the story, we all know about limited editions club, and from time to time,
Sure.
I'm sure everybody's seen them. This man used to be the prime dealer in LECs, Philip Duchanis. This is his 1929 to 1962 catalog of everything that was listed, that was ever done by the LEC up to that date. I have a later set of catalogs somewhere that it took 2 volumes because of the amount of titles that had been added to the press. So, what is the history of the LEC? It's the Limited Editions Club. What we know about, most of us know this, the Limited Editions Club came first, and Heritage Press comes after that. So, most of whatever you see Limited Editions Club is going to say first published by R.H. Macy, which is Macy's, Gimbels, and all that New York retail stuff. The only thing I can add about Heritage Press that some of you may not know is this. They did actually do one book in a limited edition. It's called Ink and Blood by Heritage Press. It was illustrated by author Six, SZYK, noted, gorgeous illustrator. And it was not anti-Nazi cartoons. And in the Heritage Press edition, it's one of 1,000 copies. So that's a nice heritage to find. Anywhere from $600 to $800 or $1,000. I think it was worth more at one time in the past, but we can thank and curse the computers for certain things. Okay, so to talk about it, LEC. Macy's, if you didn't know this, had a book department. Macy's, if you knew that they had a book department, you might not have known, or you knew that they had a rare book department where customers came in and, looked for actual rare books in New York City besides on, Booksellers Row. So Macy wanted to have limited edition copies of publishers' books. For example, let's say the book was Scribner's book. Scribner comes out with a limited edition of some fiction writer, that was hot at the time. And let's say the limited edition was 500 copies of a signed limited edition of this book. If Macy wanted to have half a dozen or a dozen copies of that limited edition for his rare book business, the publishers made him buy whatever trade editions they had at the time. That could have been the second edition, the eighth edition, whatever it was, or overlapping, first, second, so on and so forth. But the point is, Macy was a pretty astute business guy, and he didn't like the idea of having to buy something to get something, especially with something like books. So what did Macy do? Macy said to the publishers, help me carry this around the lobby. I'm not buying from you guys anymore. And this is what I'm going to do. And what he did was he organized the Limited Editions Club. And what did he do? He stated the mission statement of the Limited Editions Club was to come out with bigger, better, more better, well illustrated, bound, published, type fonts, whatever they could do to improve a book. They did that at the Limited Editions Club. As a result, you have some, author title combinations like James Joyce and Matisse, Picasso and Ulysses, Edward Steichen and Walden for the photographs, and other major noted illustrators and artisans of the time. So Macy's way of telling the publishers to go bug off was to form and make the Limited Editions Club. So now if you're ever on Jeopardy and you got to give a short version, that's the history of the LEC. You can find that out and other great tidbits in this book. I'm not selling mine, but the guy on the other side has 2 copies for sale, and I swear this was not rehearsed.
No,
Today was
I
just an
thought it was funny.
amazing
I had
day
it
of
sitting on my desk.
yeah, it was an unrehearsed day of coincidences in the rare book business. I don't want to talk about the first 2.
No, but no, it's funny. The LEC is, I personally have had. I don't think Steve mentioned the fact, but I believe each LEC book, or most of them, had a limited run of about, I think it was 1,500 books.
And then later 2000. Yeah, I
Yeah.
did it. I edged that
And
one out.
and I don't know if I've ever, I know Oak Knoll Press, Oak Knoll, which is a publisher and a used book person, had a marvelous catalog about a year ago, which I have, which was probably 200 to 300 LAC books, which I believe were all from the same number. The one I had, maybe Steve will remember seeing, I had, I think it was number 1490 or something like that. All of the books.
I sold them to you.
Yeah, that's what I meant. I didn't know whether you want to mention it or not, so I was dodging that. But the point is, all of mine, all 100 or so, were in the same number. So what happened is many of the subscribers started subscribing, and rather than like the Reader's Digest or something, any of the Book of the Month clubs, you actually got a number assigned to you. He did cut it off, and then Steve said, I think I remember that now, that it went to 2000. But beyond that, that was it. Well, Heritage went to as high as they could sell of every book. But so there is a certain limit to the thing, and I still am amazed. I've sold some limited edition clubs in the hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. But how many I've let go in the $25 to $50 range that are superbly illustrated, superbly manufactured. The type is fantastic. They usually, Steve, do they all come in slipcases? I can't remember.
Yeah, I can't think of one that didn't. Yeah.
So you've got this really nice, and obviously Steve was saying, these are books that are masterpieces. I mean, there's not they ran the gamut from Greek mythology to current books, but if anybody ever sat down and read the complete set of limited editions, I think you would have a truly superb education, and it would be fun to do because they are pretty, they're well made, the paper is good, everything's good about them. They're not, some of the Book of the Month clubs, and I'm just picking on them, are basically seconds or reprints or whatever, but limited editions clubs are very, very nice.
I don't know how the market is today because it was a northern market when I was there. I don't see it down here. There was a tremendous market for the ephemera of the limited editions.
It still is, yeah.
And one of the underestimated things about both the Heritage Press and the Limited Editions Club is the disproportionate impact they had during their time. We take it for granted now that we have big box stores and we have malls and all of that, but 80, 90 years ago, most of America had no bookstores at all. Even when I was born 40, 50 years ago, the town I grew up in had no bookstore. And when I went to college and had a car, on my way home, I would stop in Charlotte and go to the big malls like South Park and Eastridge, where they had bookstores, the big chains, and you could actually buy books. But to be able to subscribe to books, even if they were knockoffs like the Book of the Month Club, that was like a lifeline to people in scattered communities all over America. Even here in Chester, South Carolina, which has a population of 6,000, which is pretty much the same as it was 80 years ago, I have been able to score a whole stack of the Heritage Society editions. This one is the Pickwick Papers.
Lovely book. Yeah, great read.
They're just they're on quality paper. They're stunningly attractive. This one is Thomas Hardy's Far from the Madding Crowd.
Yeah. Classic literature. Yeah. It goes
this
on.
This one is Wilkie Collins, the Moonstone.
When you're finding there, Lindsay, is it more the literature, or is it did you see any of the illustrated, like the Job and Ruth and some of those those type?
I just have the Heritage Press editions.
Yeah.
They're all copiously illustrated. This is one called "This Is the Hour," a novel about Francisco Goya.
Okay, interesting.
Which is, befits an artist. It's full of illustrations.
Yeah.
I have the American Poets series. This one is the edition of Longfellow.
That works. We've heard of
Keep in
him.
mind, keep in mind, these books are 80 years old. They
Yeah.
all came out in the late 1930s, and the bindings still hold
Right.
up. They haven't cracked. The paper
Nope.
isn't coming apart.
Nope.
This is The Moon and Sixpence,
Ah,
which was one of Macy's big deals. This
Yeah.
was really one of the books where he launched the limited edition series, because he went to Somerset Maugham and offered him a bag of money to license this book to him. And we
okay.
forget now that Maugham at the time was the highest paid author in the history of the planet.
Well,
He made
Wow.
millions of dollars a year, and just everything he produced turned to gold. So that was an amazing book. This is one called The Literary Works of Abraham Lincoln, which has a wonderful embossed
yeah.
profile of Lincoln on the cover.
Yeah, I can see it. Great. Yeah.
And then the last one I have is the famous Around the World in 80 Days.
Great
And
movie.
these were, the stunning thing about them is how well designed they were, as you
Yeah.
two were talking about. These were works of art. And yeah, they may have cost $5 or $6, which 80 years ago was a lot of money. But, how many books do we see that look this nice in terms of
I have
typesetting?
never seen a bad heritage, let alone a book of the month.
No,
Club.
none of no, they're
I'm not.
not.
I mean, a limited editions club. Sorry.
And, so here we were in a little town in the center of South Carolina where somebody had a yen to read and own great literature. And these kinds of series made it possible for them to do that. And I walked into a thrift store here and I found these and I bought them on the spot because, I'm torn, frankly, between trying to sell them and just keeping them. Because as Thorne, you have devoted much more study to this than I have, but as exercises in machine-produced books, these are just works of art.
Yeah, they are.
They're stunningly well produced, and they were produced to last forever.
There's a strong market for them around Christmas time. Heritage Press. I mean, that's when we see them going in the years that I've observed in the field, that seems to be the best time of year to sell them. They are the perfect dollar bang for the buck gift book.
Yeah.
They're not expensive, even though the LECs, you can get a lot of them for, well under $100. With Heritage Press, you're talking what, $5 to $15 to $25 range in price, if that. They make great gift books.
I think they're one. We talk a lot about how to get started in collecting books, and my view is that in terms of value for money, you can never go wrong buying a Heritage Press book. Because not only do they offer you the best literature of the last 150 years, but they offer it to you in a binding and a typesetting and then an illustration that is timeless and that you will treasure for all of your days. And that is one of the joys of collecting, is finding a book that truly you want to feel it. You want to hold it. It's like Marie Kondo says, you hold it up to your neck and it gives you joy.
Yeah, but there's more than 30 Heritage Press books.
Oh, yeah. Well, she has her limits.
I think there's a... No, go ahead.
But, the idea that books were once published not only to be read, but to be treasured because they were just so well put together is something that we have more or less lost sight of, except at the high end of the market now. And it is a great loss because that was, the fact that I was able to find these in this little town in South Carolina is a testament to how much they were valued. They were kept, they were looked after, and they were loved. And that is how you build a collection.
That'd be a great idea from now on. If anybody says, I want to start collecting, what could I collect if I wanted to be a completist? I would highly recommend Heritage Press. I mean, it's an obtainable thing and all of that. They get a great bang for the buck at the end, in that sense. They've enjoyed the reading of it. And it's too bad we're not a nationally seen audience with 10,000 million people, because we would have caused an uptick on Biblio and
What?
Heritage Press books. You know?
Well, then I'd be on a beach in Guatemala.
Yeah.
I would have sold this stack in a heartbeat and gotten the hell out of town.
Yeah.
But that's the other thing about this is it illustrates, as Felix Owen has shown us so many times, how collectible books are everywhere. You just have to look for them. And in a town like Chester, which was a prosperous agricultural town, and then a railroad town, and then a commercial town. So you drive up and down the main streets of this little town I live in and see the enormous mansions that were built by the cotton fortunes and the railroad fortunes and the banking fortunes. And in every one, there are stacks of books like this
So
by
here's
people who took seriously the availability of things like the R.H. Macy Company being willing to make these books and sell them anywhere you wanted to order them.
I'm a firm believer that in the town, whether it's your town, Chester, or somebody else's town that's in that range, 6, 12, 15,000 people, there's got to be a couple of houses, Lindsay, unbeknownst to you at this moment in time, that are probably harboring a phenomenal rare book library, or at least, a couple of titles that all of us would cream over, so to speak. Question is, how do you get those? How do you? I'd love to hear you say one day, wow, walked into this house and, I'm now driving a Maserati or whatever your car choice might be. I firmly believe there are collections like that all over the country, let alone in,
And they are. But, people here live a long time. I've been to several funerals recently for members of my church who were in their late 90s and who inherited their homes and their contents from their parents and their grandparents. I think for those people, the books are part of the wallpaper. They are part of the life they lead in that house, and they do not necessarily think of them as something sellable. So what I've spent the last year and a half doing is just sitting and listening to people talk and learning who is who around town. And I have some ideas now that I did not have a year ago about places I might look. But I am not yet at the point where I can show up on the doorstep because I do not have the charm and the good looks that Felix Owen does. To be able to chat my way in to see what they have. The other thing I do is I make a regular circuit of the 3 thrift stores in town, because a lot of people, when these very old people die, a lot of their heirs just pile up all the books and ship them out.
Mm-hmm.
And I found all of these that I showed you in a thrift store, and I bought them for $1 a piece.
And you think they all came from the same house?
I know they did, because they have a bookmark in them by the owner. And so that's one of the things you look for, and why you have to go back and look regularly, because things like this will come in a flood one week.
Mm-hmm.
And they may be there the next week, they may be not.
Yeah.
But, if you know what you're looking for, and when I see an LEC title or a Heritage Press title, I'll buy it, whatever it is, because even if it's not in grade A condition, they were so well made that you'll never find one, unless it was abused, in less than good to very good condition.
Yeah.
And so they're a smart investment.
It's interesting you said, Lindsay, a bookmark. in these books that you just bought, the heritage, which generally indicates, somebody was a reader, proud of what he had. Those weren't just stuff he'd bought at the local Piggly Wiggly or whatever it was in those days. They were part of his library and probably
Yeah.
remained there from
Was
the
it
30s till the grandkids sold the house last week.
was
You're
it a
very right
nice
in what
book
you said
plate?
there.
A nice book plate, or just
Some have book plates and others are just signed, but
huh,
they all came from the same
same house?
family.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
why I was just curious what the.
So then I was able to back up and find out who they were. And from that, who are their friends? Are they still around? Because you can assume that literary people in a town of 5,000 people 80 years ago in the middle of nowhere, they were talking to other people like
Oh, of
them.
course.
Yeah,
There
Michael made a.
were little book clubs, and they traded books, and so it's like doing any kind of research in bibliography. You follow the trail where it will lead you. And in a town like Chester, I look from one house to the next.
Michael, you make a good point. Some of the local auctions in a town like that could wind up with an accidental dose of rare books and not know it.
Yeah.
I see that easily. Well, guys, I don't know about you guys, but tonight we're rocking and rolling at the Hollywood Beach Resort.
I
Another
don't think
one.
I'll be there, but we'll miss
Well,
you.
we got invited to another reunion. I can't believe it. I've been to more proms, reunions, and graduations than I did in my own era. But should be
Well,
fun.
My
yeah.
my uncle Mac is kind of like you, Steve. He was the last of the 8 children of my grandparents, and so he was a little too young to serve in World War II. But his older brother Hubert who served on half a dozen different ships in the Navy during the war, got into the habit of going around the country year after year to all these different ship reunions. And
Oh, yeah.
he would take Mac along with him. And by then, Hubert and Mac were both in their 70s. And so nobody really knew whether Mac had been on the ship or not. He would show up with his Navy's cap.
Well, I got a landmark.
And he eventually became accepted as just one more of the crew of these many different ships on which he never served.
Yeah, close.
And Hubert is dead. Mac is 86, and he still goes back to a few of those ship reunions.
A couple of the classes were actually at our wedding on the dock, but this is not one of them. This is a class of 1979. For it to be at our wedding, they had to be from 87 and up.
Yeah.
Anyway, guys, I hope you all have a great weekend on camera, off camera. Everybody out there, thank you for joining us.
Keep chatting till I run the rest of the credits.
I will do that. I will do that feverishly. Look,
it's funny you mentioned that, Lindsay. I always stop at the Hilton Hotel in Fayetteville, which is where a bunch of military bases are, and the Special Forces train there. 101st, 82nd Airborne Special Forces.
I was born there.
Oh, well, one year I stopped on my way to the Rare Book School, and pretty much the same thing happened to me. It was a Green Beret convention at my hotel, and they only had a couple of rooms. I'd booked a year in advance, so there's about 5 people in this whole damn hotel that weren't ex-Green Berets, and plus all the ones that came in from the bases. And I couldn't walk through the bar to the bathroom to the whatever without somebody, because I was about the right age, I am, to have been at the very early days of the Green Berets in Vietnam. I mean, and I kept, it was a good excuse, but I really didn't feel like lying to America's heroes. So I just kind of kept saying no. And, I'm not going to the party at 5:30, kind of thing, because I must have been at least 5 or 6 times. And I only spent one night there, but it was getting a little freaky. And I finally realized what was going on. I was the same age as the younger guys here, who were in their 60s, so there you have it. It was exactly like your, my that war was Vietnam, and your uncle was Miss World War II or Korea. I think you said World War II. But you look at it, and after you're After all those years, the guy's that old and he's wandering around the place. He probably, if he didn't go, shit, he should have. You know?
I hope they have good
Exactly.
food in this one.
It's an era that is closing.
Oh,
My mother was the only daughter of 8 children. She had 7 brothers, and she
Yeah.
was the last but one. And Mac was younger than her, so he didn't get called up. But the other 6 were all in World War II at the same time.
sure.
And
So was most of America. Yeah, right.
yeah, my mother told me some heartbreaking stories about things like the Normandy invasion, where the family knew that 4 of the boys were in Europe, but they didn't know where. And
Oh,
yet
yeah.
they were hearing the radio reports of this gigantic invasion. And,
Oh, and all secret.
We can't now imagine what it was like to have the bulk of your progeny a continent away in a war that was consuming the world, and wondering where they were, how they were, and whether they would come home.
Oh, crazy.
May we never have to think that way again.
It was my grandparents' good fortune that all 6 of the boys came back in one piece.
Crazy. Yeah, there's a U.S. I'll leave it for this. There's a U.S. Navy destroyer called the USS Sullivan. I think it's the second one now. But the Sullivan brothers were similar. There's 5 of them, I think it was. And they all wanted to serve on the same ship. It was a cruiser. I forget which one it was. It was sunk. They all died. And after that, the Department of the Navy said, never again can a family serve together. I think you can have 2 brothers, maybe, but not a whole family, because they were all went down with the ship.
Well, guys, I got a boogie. I will see you guys one day at the meeting.
We're done, kids. Thank you all. A wonderful show. Thank you for all of our participants and viewers, and we'll see you again next week.
All right.
Find some good stuff. Tell us about it. Ciao, ciao.